Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about the demand curve. So you would already know by this stage, hopefully, that the demand curve is downward sloping. So as the price goes down, the quantity demanded increases. So think about yourself as a customer. If there's a product that you want and the price of it goes down, you're more likely to want to buy it. If the price of a product goes up, you're less likely to buy it. So that pretty much applies to a lot of people. So if price goes down, more demand, price goes up, less demand. And that explains why the demand is downward sloping. Okay, so shifts in demand, really, really important. And you need to be able to identify the difference between a shift, a contraction, and expansion. So pretty much identify the difference between shifts and movements along the demand curve. So if something causes a shift in demand, it's because of something that's not price related. So if we look at this graph here, and let's say the demand curve shifts from this blue line to the green line. Yeah. So that means that the demand has shifted, right? So at any given price, there's a greater quantity of that product demanded. So that could be due to a number of reasons. So people might have more income. So regardless of what the price of the product is, they're more able to afford it. Perhaps the substitute has fallen. Perhaps the substitute has become more expensive. So now they're just buying this good or service instead. Maybe the complement has been cheaper. So now they're buying more of this good or service. Actually, I think it would be a good idea to do this with an example. So let's talk about bread. Let's say this whole graph tells us the demand for bread. As a general rule, if people's income increases, more demand for bread, right? Like people are more able and more willing to buy bread at any given price. Substitutes. So maybe rice is a good substitute for bread, I guess. So if the price of rice goes up by a lot, people might switch to bread instead to get their carbohydrates. So demand for bread increases. Complements. So complement is something that goes with a product. So usually people like to eat bread with jam or butter. So let's say the price of butter falls by a lot. Yep, so people are more likely to get butter and they'll be like, okay, you know what will go really well with this butter? Perhaps a loaf of bread. So demand for bread increases at any given price. Taste. So if we look at, news articles or media, a lot of things can change taste. So if we have an article coming out that tells you bread is the next superfood, it's super healthy, has cancer prevention properties, as a general rule, you'd think that people are more likely to buy bread. So that would also shift the demand for bread to the right. Consumer confidence, I guess that's not super related to bread. It's kind of hard to be confident in your bread, but that's pretty much like when consumers, they buy a product because they're confident in it. So they know it's a good product, they know that it will last, and they know pretty much like that they're pretty much confident in the product. So let's say the quality of bread is really good and consumers believe that bread quality is amazing. They'll probably buy bread more frequently at any given price. So greater quantity of bread demanded at any given price. So all of these are shifts in the demand curve to the right, anything that will increase the quantity demanded regardless of price. Now, if we want to see a shift in the demand to the left, let's still look at bread. It's just sort of the opposite has to happen. So shift in demand left because of low income. Substitutes are now cheaper. So if rice is now super, super cheap, people are probably going to go from bread and eat rice instead. Complements. So let's say butter, jam are super, super expensive. People are less likely to buy that butter and jam, and they're less likely to associate that with bread as well. Taste. So again, people's taste. So if there's an article that comes out tomorrow saying that bread is the worst thing you can eat, it's the next carcinogen or something like that, then people are less likely to want to eat bread. So quantity demanded goes down. Consumer confidence, so like I said earlier, if people have a poor idea of bread and they are not confident in the quality of the bread, they're probably not going to buy it. So yeah, that's pretty much the things that influence demand and cause it to shift left or right. a movement in the demand curve, so that's caused by a change in price. So anytime a price changes, so anytime a price of that exact product changes, there's a movement along the demand curve. So there's no shift. So remember, a shift is an increase in demand regardless of price. So at any given price, there is more or less demand. Whereas a movement is at a certain price, there is more or less demand. So, for example, if the price of bread is increased by $1, there will be a contraction in the demand for bread because there's a higher price. It's likely that less people are able to afford it. Demand goes down at that price. So that's pretty much the difference. If the price of bread goes down, there's an expansion of demand. So that's not the same as a shift. So that's just something really important to keep in mind.